Hey everyone, welcome to Fort Malthus. I wanted to do something a little bit different. So recently I've been posting a lot of shorts about my 3D printing. So I play video games on the channel, but my shorts are generally about 3D printing, painting, and gardening. And I seem to get a pretty good response to those. Haven't really picked up on the gaming yet. That's fine. But one thing I wanted to maybe look at as a group is how to just do a basic thing in Chitubox. It's pretty easy. So let's see. Well, let's pick one of my dudes here. So here's my Blitz Bomber. We went on Cults 3D and we downloaded it. And what we did, actually, that's a little complicated. Let's not do that one. Let's look at the October boss. This is the very high quality, um, very high quality print that I have on my desk that I've shown several times because I'm really proud of it. I printed it in two parts, and I'll show you how to do that. So what we're going to do is you're going to first download it from someplace like Cults. You're going to create a folder. So for me, it's 40K. So I just made a desktop, Chitubox, Warhammer, work, and then the individual zip file, which I unzip there. And then, so when you first open up a zipped file, and you don't quite know what size of everything is, make this big. As you can see, this is the specifics for like my individual Mars 3 printer, which is an elegoo printer. What you'll do is you'll go in here and you will go to settings. So for me, I have an elegoo Mars 3. It automatically propagates all this stuff in. All you'll have to do is you'll delete the default one and you'll go to make a new one. It'll ask you what printer you have. You print it in, automatically fills everything in. Then you can go in here. You can put what kind of resin you use, what the cost is, your printing parameters. So for me, I use eco resin. I found that 3 seconds exposure time is really good. Um, Aside from that, just kind of you can go on the forums and kind of figure out what specific resin stuff you're using, what you can do to tweak it, stuff like that. So once you get that all set up, you get your build plate. It'll automatically make your build plate the exact size it should be. So for mine, the default was like out to here. So the first couple prints I made before I changed the default, it was everything was taller and skinnier than it should have been because it was trying to take something from a bigger rectangle and force it onto a smaller one. So what we did is we opened up all four of the STLs. As you can see, we've got the torso, arm, and legs. So when I made mine, which is about the size of the palm of my hand, or size of my whole hand, really, is I go over here, I unselect it so that I can individually move the bits. I looked at them, I'm like, okay, let's say we take these and we make them do all this. This is 100%. This is what the designer of the STL wanted to make it. So let's say we do 200%, right? That just makes it bigger, makes it cooler, easier to work with. Does use more resin, but honestly, you know, if you can afford this hobby, you're not worrying about resin. Also, if you follow me, I'll put my Reddit in the description. Every time I see that they have a print or a resin sale, like a 2 for 1, which anycubic, the people I use their resin, they do them pretty often, and I post about it. So if you're interested in that, you can follow me on Reddit. Um, yeah, so what you do is you generally take a look at your dudes and you find out A, which parts are the biggest. So we have 4 parts here. This arm, obviously the smallest. This arm, obviously the longest, which we'll talk about in a second. The torso is probably the bulkiest next to the legs. So what we'll do is we'll kind of match them up. So when you're doing resin printing, you're going to move anything you want to build onto the build plate, and you can kind of rotate it to make it fit, right? So as you can see, these legs fit on the build plate. Everything's fine. When we take this arm, and as you can see, almost, right? But he's kind of colliding here, and he's a little off. So why don't we rotate him? You can rotate him like this. And then all you gotta do is click off, and you can start moving him again. And that's a little bit better, right? Maybe we can move him a little bit this way. Oh, running into, technically we're all in. There's no red. Okay. And we're not running into him anymore. But what we can also try to do is maybe go a little bit higher of an angle. You always want to have it at an angle. I will say that. I've had some problems with blunting, which I've also shown on my shorts. And a lot of that is because of the fact that I tried to print flat instead of putting them like a slight angle. So this would probably work, but what we're going to do instead is rotate this guy, and we're going to try to get him out from under so that there's a clear linear arrow here of no overhang. Okay? So we're only going to focus on these legs and this claw. We'll do the torso and the arm here in a minute. So I'm going to delete that, delete that. I'm going to do select all. We're going to go and see what it looks like when we put it on a platform. When you're using Chitubox, the automated supports are very good. Couple of things. It should start you out at like 5mm or 2. I always bump it up to 6, which adds a little bit of build time, but I'll show you here in a second. It's hard to explain when there's no supports. As you can see, I did the automated supports, and let's say I do 2, right? So ignore the red, but just imagine this is all I'd have, right? Actually, what am I doing? So I could just do this. So I could do this. Not a huge deal. However, you could have some blunting because you're going from a solid mass of support platform to 1.5, or it's like 1.5mm of supports to a flat surface. But if you move it up to a 6 and you do platform, and this is just medium. We'll talk about that in a minute. As you can see, you got a lot more room. So when you're trying to pull these off the build plate, sometimes this will get incredibly stuck. I don't know if that's a common thing with all resins, but for my eco resin, I've noticed that this stuff can get hard as nails, especially if I let it sit overnight or something to drip drain. But what I can do is I can take my clippers and clip in here because I've got plenty of room, and then I can at least get the big part off, the part that I care about what it looks like, the part that's fragile, and I can remove it, and then I can be as rough as I want with this because the build plate is made of fucking steel, and the supports are gonna chip off, because you're gonna use your like chisel thing that comes with the build plate. And then over here, as you can see, these long, thin supports look like they don't have a lot of strength, but they build them really well. Like they've all got like internal supports. They all, if they're within a certain amount of distance with each other, as you can see, we can look at this scaffolding right here. This one's going up attaching here, then down to this one over here. And as you can see, they're all interlaced and it works out great. Uh, one thing to one thing that you can watch out for though is just kind of go and look around. Anything that kind of sticks out. So like these spikes, right? When I printed mine, I came in and I did a little support on each spike, like this. Not necessarily, 100% necessary, but it offers it the ability to have some support, right? It doesn't really use any more resin. It doesn't make anything more complicated. Um, but what it does do is it just gives it that optional little support. Another thing is in Chitubox, when you come up from the bottom, it gets rid of the platform and it shows the places that need the most support. So light blue are well supported and easily built because they are contiguous with other parts. Whereas like this flat foot is not. This crotch plate is not. Thigh, not. Backpack, not. So that's the places that are going to need more support. So you go in here and you look at your automated ones. There's one already right in the middle of this. There's several around the outside of this one. The feet have lots of support. If we go over to the glove, I can do it, I swear. It's got lots in the red areas. Everything looks good. Okay? So as you can see, everything looks good. And if you were to do light, it just makes the supports thinner, so you might need more. But one thing that does help is this contact shape right here in diameter. Any spot it touches, like right here, this is a perfectly or nearly perfectly smooth sphere, semi-sphere. But where it touches, it's going to have a little bit of texture that you can either sand off or leave. I kind of leave it, especially on my orc stuff because it kind of looks like rivets or battle damage. I'm not too worried about it, right? If you're building something that looks supposed to look perfect or you're building like a prototype or something, then you're going to need to be more conscious about where you put your supports. And also, you might want to make thinner ones or use different shapes, stuff like that. You can just come in here and mess around. It's not going to cause any harm. Um, if you are going to mess with this, what I would do is I would take a design, run it on medium with auto supports, go through, do all your normal stuff, and then print it. If it works doing that, then come back in, mess around with the settings, see what happens. Print something small, but print it fairly high off the build plate, print it sideways so that you have to support it. And um, you can come in here and you can do all sorts of weird stuff, and you'll know because you've got the experience with that particular item. But for like just this, that I'm just going to print once, prime, paint, and sit on a shelf, it's I I don't care, man. I'm just excited that I get to make stuff, right? So after we get the supports put on, we go in here, we click this little button. We go to our settings just to make sure everything is set how we want it. Okay. We go to slice. Uh, yeah, we go to slice. We'll talk about hollowing here in a second. It gives us the warning that something's out of the build plate. Let's look up here, and it's like it is two little bits of the platform. It's right. Sorry, it's hard to show a little bit. Right there. See these right here? These are technically outside the build plate. However, you can ignore it because there's at least half. So this little base right here between the support and the actual platform, I'd say if there's this much room between the platform beginning and the platform being cut off, you're fine. I haven't had any problems with it. So go ahead and go to slice. What it'll do is it'll now break it up into individual Z layers, which is ridiculous. So this is 2,300 layers. What we're going to do is we're going to detect islands, which are potential problems in your build. Now, islands are a difficult concept to understand because the way they work is not necessarily how you think they would. You think any island would be bad, but internal islands are just necessary. In fact, hollowing, which is what I'm going to show you here in a minute, it causes islands, and you can just kind of ignore them. But what we're going to do is I'll show you is we'll search for islands. We'll have a bunch. We'll probably have at least 500 because it goes by individual Z level, and we have 2,300 of them. And it only has to detect one per Z level to register it. So I have noticed sometimes that you do get islands. They do cause problems. But generally when you're printing something that other people have printed, the islands aren't a problem. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over here. We have 52 islands, not so bad. We're going to click this button, and it's going to show us all the Z levels that have islands. So we're going to go to this one right here. And it's going to show us exactly what Z level it is, and the island is right there. It's that red line. Not a huge deal, right? So we just kind of, this is kind of cool to watch, right? So like as you can see, as those two little bits separate, there's an island. And then, I mean, there's just little tiny ones. And yeah, it could cause a print error, but I mean, the print error would only affect this, which is an internal bit on an otherwise chunky, like say like these little guys, right? Otherwise chunky um, model. It's probably not going to cause an issue, and if it does, reprint it. So I've got my actual price. This half of the model will cost me about $3. Take about 6 hours. Not so bad. Make sure this is right. Okay. And then you're going to put it on your hard drive by doing save. And then it'll be an F drive if you're using the one that they give you from elegoo. And I assume very similar for anycubic and Creality. So for our example, I will go and just save this in my Warhammer 40k one. And it's a CTB. And it takes a little bit, but it's going to write. You can just delete the islands, by the way, by using this button up here. It's not necessary. Mind you, these instructions are for simpler builds, so if you do have something very complex, generally the place you get it from will have a README or a comments section, and you'll be able to see common problems there. So now it's written. All we gotta do is go back, and we can start a new one. Oh, one more thing. Save it as a non-sliced file also in the same spot. So, boo boo boo. Orc part 1. And then what we'll do is we'll save that. And then we can create a new one. And now we can do the other half, right? So it's a little chunky, right? So what's the first thing we gotta do? We gotta go in here, we gotta scale everything up to 200%. Put his arm together. You could print it like that, by the way, if you can get it to work. Like if you can get this to fit perfectly how it would fit when you glue it, it will print as one piece. I have never done it. It was suggested to look into it by one of my viewers, I might do it. Don't know. It terrifies me. I'd rather just glue them. So, as you can see, this is working pretty well, right? What we're going to do is we're going to take them, and this guy's pretty good actually, and then this guy, when I originally printed him, I printed him like this, just like this, and I got elephant's foot on the bottom here, and I had to sand the shit out of it. So, that kind of sucked. What you can do to help prevent that is whenever you have a surface like that that you need to be flat, it's kind of rocking. So now it's at an angle. Whoa, come back here. Sorry, Chidu likes to do that. So, as you can see, everything's good, right? So what are we going to do? We're going to go up here, select all. Actually, let's look at hollowing. So we'll click on our big guy here, and we'll go up here, and we'll click on the hollow button. This will basically try to save you resin by hollowing them out to 30% fill density. It's a pretty cool process to watch too. It'll just go by Z level, and as you can see, it's just replacing the solid mass with a honeycomb. When you do that, it is very, very important that you come in with a hole. You pick some spots. So, like, armpits, really good. If it'll let me. Nope. There we go. Got one. So what that does is it gives it a drain hole for all the liquid resin that gets caught inside because it's hollow. If you don't do that, it can explode. I'm not kidding. I've seen pictures. I gotta look for the... There we go. So you put them in innocuous places. They aren't going to cause an issue, right? You just look for that little red icon. And try to find ones that will help it drain. There we go. You want to have at least 3. Two is the minimum. 3 is better. 4 is even better. You will not see these things really once you paint them. The paint will fill them. They are tiny. What's funny is when you go to like put it in your washing station and you submerge it in water, you'll see all the little bubbles of the IPA or water or whatever you're using to wash it going in. That's great because that means that it will flush out the inside. So like I was doing my armature body today, which is huge. It's like twice as big as this orc. And I put it in my washing station and it was the only thing I could fit in there. And I just saw the little bubbles come up and then like immediately after the bubbles started to stop, I could see resin coming up out of it because it was getting forced out. And then when I finished washing it, what I did is I pulled it up and I set it sideways in the tray on top of my washing station, left for about 5 minutes. That's how long it took for it to drain out. But if you only had one hole, it would not drain unless you put something like a paper towel there to draw it out, because it wouldn't have a way for air to get in as water escaped. So, anyway, that's my soapbox for that. We can get rid of these plugs, I believe. For some reason, whenever you cut a hole in, it just like has to put the material it's like, I don't know, it treats it like it's a regular item. Like whenever you drill a hole in something, little bits come out, and that's basically what it was doing. So we auto-platformed. This is going to be a good opportunity to show you some things that kind of suck. So mine worked really well, except for this part. I did have, however, some issues with the teeth. Because I was coming at it straight up and down, it built very small supports inside the mouth, so I had to go in there with like a it was like a computer screwdriver or like a watch screwdriver. It felt something very thin, like a flathead watch screwdriver, and I had to go in there and knock them out before I had a chance to like harden it because I didn't want them to harden in there, and it kind of caused some issues. but when you're at an angle, at least you can do stuff like this, and you know, it's not actually touching the mouth, but it will support that tooth. Because you want the really fine details like the teeth to come through to make it look really cool. Just so you guys can see it, that's a hole we made, right? That's a drain hole. I'm gonna put a little, I don't like there's no supports on this, so I'm just gonna do a couple random ones. And then the arm looks good. I want one like right there. Okay. And then looking at it, it looks pretty good. Some of the things you're going to have an issue with are things like this that stick out. But since you've got it at an angle, you can come in with your long, tall supports like this, and they get a little funky, but they work. Same thing with like right here, or like right there, right? Just these sharp edges are what you want to watch out for, because you want that detail on your final model, and you don't want it to get like messed up just because it didn't have something there to support it. Now, mind you, every single one of these is going to leave a little blip that you might have to sand off, or add a little putty, or green stuff, or goo, or paste. Anything like that will cover up little tiny uh, sprue marks. And honestly, as long as you remove them before you cure it, I've had no issues. Like, unless it is a completely flat surface that has no detail on its own, I've had no issues. So just keep that in mind and practice. So if you want to make something big like this, maybe just do the arm first. Maybe just print out the arm, do some supports, try some different stuff, then work your way up. So on my armature, what I did first is I just printed out the Vulcan cannon because it was not the smallest piece, but it was a line. It was a very thin but detailed piece that I could test out to make sure that my system was calibrated right and that I moved from like a 3.5 to a 3 second exposure time, and so I wanted to test it out and it worked. So we've got our supports on here. So what are we gonna do? Actually, I see another thing I want to put like a support or two on. That's these dope shoulder spikes. Just right at the base. And yeah, it's probably overboard, but things like this are fragile. So go back in here, check our settings. Everything is the same. I only have one profile. I know people who have like three, so the reason why I say to check it is because you never know if you have more than one. We're gonna slice it. You are going to detect islands. This one's gonna have a lot more islands because it's hollow now. But what we're going to do is we're going to give it a quick scan to make sure it doesn't have anything weird. The islands that you mainly care about are external islands and islands that are going to leave gaps in between, like Z levels, and leave things unable to be supported. But I mean, I didn't have any problems the first time. I mean, this was the third model I ever printed, so and it turned out just great. The more complex the model, obviously, the longer this is going to take. My armature, its tentacle arm and torso part took like 7 minutes to run, but then again, I don't have a very good computer, so I believe the better your graphics and RAM, the faster this will go. Pretty much anything works like that these days. 56 islands, not so bad. Let's see what we got here. Anything too terrible? Internal canister. Yep. As you can see, when we hollowed it out, we made some islands. Should be fine. Elegoo's auto hollow. As long as you don't do just straight up actual hollowing, you do this matrix. I've had literally no problems with it. They've done a very good job programming it. Still just the honeycomb. I mean, we are going to save a lot of material doing. Oh, I love this. If you watch this over here, it's just fucking mesmerizing too. Anyway, I don't believe we have anything game changing here. Everything is just pretty much internal to the hollowing. So what are we going to do? We're going to save it. Actually, I'll show you how to delete the islands. Islands of all layers, trash them. That way, they're still there. It just doesn't bother you with them. Technically, if you were doing something super complicated like an interlocking machine or something that does like an action, we've all seen those, like the snakes that can move and slither and stuff right off the build plate. Those are the kind of things where you've got to go Z level by Z level and make sure your islands are good. This is not that kind of thing. So what are we going to do? We're going to save it. We're going to do what I saved the other way. It's like Orcs Part 1, right? Okay. It's going to write the file. Um, so like I said in the first one, you can just automatically go ahead and write it to your flash drive. If your flash drive is bad, as to say, if your hard drives on your computer are fast, it might be better to go ahead and put it onto your hard drive and then move it over to your flash drive. I haven't really noticed a difference because my computer's old and I use mainly HDDs and not solid state drives. But if you had a solid state drive, I'm pretty sure it would write faster over there. So it might be worth your time to do that. Um, Aside from that, I mean, it's a pretty once you get a good grasp on what needs supporting and not overcrowding your build plate and things like that, you're good. You're good. So back and we're good to go. We've got both of them written up. We're gonna go ahead and save this dude as Orc Part 2, Chitubox, and boom. That is how you take a 3D Models STLs that we just freshly downloaded. You put them on the build plate, you support them, you slice them, you look at islands to make sure everything's okay, you add extra supports as needed, and you save them properly. So I hope you enjoyed this, and if you're interested in what the final version of this looks like, I have several shorts you can check out. One making fun of people who don't use eco resin, and one just kind of showing off what I've built so far. Um, but yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it helped. If you have any questions, please let me know. And like I said, I post on Reddit anytime I see that they're having a sale on eco resin, which is a plant-based resin that usually uses soybean oil, and it has much lower VOCs than a normal uh, petroleum resin, and helps with things like headaches and stuff. It's basically the difference between painting with an old school paint inside and a new low VOC paint. If that gives you a little bit more of a idea, I have I literally people are gonna hate this. My work desk, my 3D printer is on my work desk. I was working on my armature while working, and I had no problems. I just have a fan that moves the air out of the room, and I have my bathroom fan on uh, in the connected bathroom, and it circulates the air just fine. So I hope you enjoyed this and got something out of it. If you did, please leave a like, share it with someone, and think about subscribing to the channel. I would appreciate it. I will talk to you guys next time. If you have any questions, leave them down below.